So the video that you guys are about to watch has been filmed over the last 6 months as I have been reading through the Savage Land series by Stacey Marie Brown. This video has been brought to you by my Patreon and by the Alphaho book club, which is my Patreon book club where we read through fantasy romance series. Every month I make a spoilery video that I post on Patreon, and then when we get to the end of the series, I edit it all together and I post it here for you guys to watch. Since probably, I want to say November, did we start this? We've been reading the Savage Land series. It is a post-apocalyptic fantasy romance series that is following a girl called Brexley, who is the ward of the king. From her position of privilege, she steals drugs from the trains that transport them throughout the city and puts those drugs on the black market so that the poorer people who need the money can profit from them instead of the profits lining at the pockets of the elite. One day when she's doing this, she is caught and thrown into a maximum security prison where she meets the alluring half-fae warrior Warwick Farkas. Now this is set in a world where there is a veil, or there was a veil, between the world of the human and the fae, and that fell around the time of the main character's birth, resulting in a war. After the war, the city of Budapest decided that it would be split directly in the middle, and the fae would have one side of the city and the humans would have the other. That is how our story begins. I'm not even up and down with this series, I'm up and then down with this series, as you guys will see throughout the coming clips. But do be warned, I think it's pretty clear at this point, but just to make it crystal clear, there are definitely going to be spoilers in this video. So if you have not read this series, or if you haven't read it and you don't want to be spoiled, then please do go ahead and read it and then come back when you are all caught up. So if you guys are interested in my Patreon or the Alphaho book club at all, the link to my Patreon is always down in my description box. The next series that we are going to be tackling is a trilogy, which is the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. I'm really excited about that one, and we are going to be getting stuck into that one in May. But just before we proceed with this video, I just want to say a big thank you to my patrons for making these videos possible and for joining me along the journey of reading this series, which I feel definitely started stronger than it ended. So I've started my reread of Savage Lands today. I'm getting it out of the way first thing in October, so there's no chance of me falling behind, and it's also my first Spookopothon pick. I'm 58 pages into it and I forgot how YA this reads at the beginning. Because I read the first 2 books in this series, I think it was like the middle of last year. I think I was reading this at around the time that I went to Rare, which I think was last summer. Why do I have no recollection of that right now? It wasn't actually, it was last spring. It was like April, I think. My main thing that I remember about this series is that it is a little bit like, it's not great. I wouldn't say this is an amazing, outstanding book, but I would say that what I read of this series is super addictive. There was stuff in it that was a little bit repetitive, like the same kind of events getting the characters out of sticky situations. Even though the beginnings were a little bit slow and difficult to get into, by the time you get to the end, I found them so addictive that I was just desperate to pick up the next book, which is why I ultimately ended up stopping reading it, because I tried to order books 3 to 6 from Waterstones so that I wouldn't have to get to the end of book 3 and be like, oh my god, I wish I could pick up book 4 right now and don't have it. And then Waterstones took 7 months to deliver them to me, which infinitely like put a plug in the series for me for a while. So I'm really glad that we're revisiting this for the Alphaho book club over the next 6 months, and I'm interested to see what I think upon reread, because right now, like, I just forgot how YA it reads at the beginning. We have this girl who's like from a place of privilege who thinks she's doing like the good thing by stealing goods from the elite so that the poor and the struggling can make a profit off them to help them alleviate their terrible living circumstances. We have a prince as her best friend, and like, of course, they're madly in love, but they can't be together. It's just very much reading like 2015 YA at this point. Obviously, I know that the tone of this does change and very abruptly, because I forgot how kind of like basic these first 60 pages were because of the tone shift that we're gonna get at some point. But yeah, it's an easy-ish read for me, but I would say still on reread, I'm not super invested in it at the beginning, even though I know that that is to come a little bit later on. So with this being a reread for me, I don't know how much content I'm gonna have for this vlog for book 1, because I'm not sure if I ever have made a spoiler vlog for a book that I've reread as opposed to one that I'm reading at the first time, but we'll see how it goes. And if I don't have a bunch of content, I guess I can roll the vlogs for books 1 and 2 together, because those 2 are the ones that I've reread, and then move on to more reactionary things from book 3 onwards. So I was right about potentially not having too much to say about this while I was reading it, because I'm actually nearly done. I have like 57 pages left and I have just beasted through this in less than 24 hours. Like the last update I gave you was less than 24 hours ago, and I'm going to be finishing this tonight. It is pretty much exactly as I remembered. Like there are bits that are a little bit not even cheesy. The way that I feel I can describe it the best is that some of the side characters feel like NPCs in video games. You know, like when you're walking through the market in Skyrim and you've got the guy just randomly going, I used to be, or is it a woman? I don't remember, but they say like, I used to be an adventurer like you until I took an arrow to the knee. Some of the dialogue in here feels like this. Like the characters don't feel like people, they feel like NPCs. I've read through all of the prison stuff now and we've done the prison break. We're out on the other side, and even Warwick Farkas, like there's some things about him I like, and there's some things about some of the content in here that makes me feel a little bit weird, but I still like the book. I still like the series. I find it compulsively readable. I can't put it down when it's in my hand, but at the same time, like I wouldn't say this is a great book, you know? I feel like potentially, and honestly, like I can't remember right now, I feel like book 2 maybe is a little better and each book is kind of a little bit better, but I actually just think maybe that it's the compulsiveness of this and how hooked I got into it that is the reason why I remember liking this series, or liking the first 2 books in this series so much. One of the characters that feels like an NPC is one of the ones that's present at the minute, which is Rosie, and the other ones are actually the brownie and is she an imp, which is Bitsy, and I can't remember the name of the brownie. OP and Bitsy also feel very NPC-ish for me. Like they're there for comedic relief. I feel like they stand out, but not in a good way, like in a you feel like you don't quite fit here kind of way. But despite all that, I am still enjoying it. I'm not sure what my rating for this is going to be at this point. I did give it 4 stars last time. Whether I still give it 4 stars is going to be interesting. I feel like if my rating does change, it's going to be changing to a 3, but I'm going to Copilot again. Normally when I reread, I don't think too hard about re-rating them when I finish them, because I feel like my first thoughts and my first reaction to the book is the most, I guess, like poignant and important. But I'm going to re-rate this and see if it slips down to a 3 a little bit, because it is a little bit YA, it is a little bit clunky, but then at the same time that's not like, it's not a bad thing. So I was right. I had very little to say in my reread of this. I just feel like it's a series that I don't really think about when I'm reading it. I just read it because like it's brain candy. I did change my rating a little bit for this one. I gave it 4 stars the first time around and I've lowered it to 3 stars this time. That's actually, I don't feel too much of a reflection on the book, but more of a reflection of me changing my rating scale a little bit, because I was essentially only using 2 to 5 stars. I was never using a 1, which ain't necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to be reading 1 stars, but I felt like I was being too generous with my 3s. So I've adjusted my rating scale now where a 4 is a book that I really love but isn't perfect, a 3 is a book that I like, and a 2 is a book that is fine, whereas 3 used to be fine and 2 used to be I don't like it, and 1 was almost never used. So now 1 is I don't like it. So I still enjoyed this, I feel, to the same level. It's just my rating style from like 2 to 4 has adjusted a little bit. So now 3 and a 4 star means something a little bit different than they did at the time that I read this first. These books are, I feel like they're nothing too deep, and I am just truly along for the ride when I'm reading them. The romance does take a while to kick in, and I feel like that helps to drive the pace, because like I'm always like, the sexual tension I think is pretty decent. I really like Warwick Farkas, who from the acknowledgements is very obviously modelled on Jason Momoa, and I ain't mad about it. But just watching the sexual tension build between those two, and then of course we have the betrayal at the end where he hands her over, really helps to drive it. And I feel like Stacey Marie Brown is excellent at making you pick up the next book, because like I said, these books are nothing revolutionary, they're nothing life-changing, but damn do I keep reading. So going into Wildlands, I have also read that one. That one's going to be a reread for me. I do know that there are certain techniques that Stacey Marie Brown uses to get characters out of situations that are definitely repeated across those two books. So I'm interested to see, I guess, what my thoughts of Wildlands are based on me moving this down to a 3 stars, because I feel like I actually remember this one a lot more than I do book 2. Like, I can't tell you where book 2 ends. I remember like a chase scene through a street, and I'm pretty sure that's all I remember at this point. So I'll check in with you guys when I pick that one up, and we'll see if we can jog my memory anyway. Excuse the dog hair. I have been cuddling Brie and sprinting all day, but I have made it 150 pages into Wildlands now. It's still transpiring exactly as I expected it to. I will say that I remembered pretty much none of this. I forgot that Brexley made it back to the human realm. She goes back to the palace for a bit. The only thing I actually remember about this book, I think I've already said, is like a chase scene that happens near the end. And you know, this book, this series has a lot of romance, considering it has absolutely no romance. Like, all's we're wanting as a collective is things to progress with Warwick, I imagine. Like, that's where I'm going. Although I do actually really like Killian. It reminds me of, or Killian reminds me of Laurie from the Fortuna Swan series, and there's actually a lot of this series that reminds me of Fortuna Swan. I think it is like the multiple love interests, the way that sometimes we have a lot of romance without it being the romance. You know me, I love a fated mate scenario but with a slow build to it, as opposed to like romantic or explicit content coming like pretty early on. So like all of these like little sexual interactions, the way that there's like fairies, and also Brexley seems to have this like magnetic sexual energy, isn't really doing it for me, but I am intrigued with Warwick. Now, like I said, these books aren't the best written things that I've ever read, so I don't feel like the execution of this series is necessarily the best, but it does still continue to be compelling and addictive, and I absolutely cannot deny that. I think at the minute I'm kind of frustrated because Caden is like obviously the ultimate fuckboy and he's still around. I think that this bit is necessary though, because for Brexley it's like a wake-up call of like, you don't belong in this life anymore, you don't want this life anymore, before assumedly throughout the rest of the series she delves more into the fae side of the world and also the half-fae, and also finds out what's going on with her. Because like I said, I've already read this and I'm pretty sure there is no resolution to why she is the way she is, why she heals so quickly while still being human. I don't think we get that answer in this book. I remember them going into some elements of it, but I don't think I was ever clear on why that was, and I don't think we ever had a definitive answer. So that's something that still like I remain interested in going throughout this book and throughout the rest of the series. I was so right about forgetting the majority of what happened in this book. I'm 248 pages in, and we've just had the reveal like a couple of chapters ago that Brexley's uncle Andres is still alive, but then we had Lynx come in being the fae that he fell in love with like however many years ago it was, and I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot about Lynx. I feel like I knew when I was reading book 1 that there was something to do with her that would come back a little bit later on, but since then like I've kind of forgotten, so that just like completely took me by surprise. I also feel like this is around the point where I start to get invested in the plot of the series as a whole, because we have a little bit more going on with the fact that Brexley has like all of this hemoglobin B or something, I might have completely made that up, that causes her to heal really quickly. And like, why does she heal really quickly? My theory is that because she was born when the veil between the humans and the fae fell, maybe she like absorbed a bunch of magic that she shouldn't have been able to otherwise. My other thought, and I remember thinking this the first time around as well, is that seeing as Andres only met her mother once, like, is her mother actually her mother? They're all adamant that she isn't actually fae, but it doesn't specify why they're so adamant that she's not fae, especially because she has very similar things going on to Warwick and they're also tied together, and he is half fae. So I feel like we have a very dynamic end to this one. We have a lot of things thrown into the mix in the last like 75-ish pages of this book. There's a lot of factions introduced in like just the second half of this one, but the way that the plot like continues to thicken is good because it like hooks me in, but I feel like the plot is continuing to thicken but we're still being blueballed for answers. Like, we still don't really know the exact circumstances of why Brexley is the way that she is, and then we're getting all of these different factions with all of these different family members introduced right at the end. And it does, once again, Stacey Marie Brown is great at keeping keeping me hooked and making me want to read the next book. But I'm gonna need some answers. I'm hoping, and I've hoped this before, I can't even remember what series it was with, but I was hoping in that, and I'm hoping in this, that eventually, or now, we stop introducing a bunch of new things and we take the time to maybe like resolve a couple of matters, a couple of questions that we have before we continue to keep branching out into like explosive, literally, because the thing that frustrates me about this series actually is the amount of explosions that conveniently get the characters out of situations. I didn't want to say it when I was reading Savage Lands in case anybody chooses to watch like the first bit of this and haven't continued on with the series, but like I feel like every problem, every sticky situation that Brexley and also Warwick get themselves in this series is solved by an explosion followed by a chase scene, and I'm hoping that we're also gonna kind of stray away from that. I mean, we'll see how it goes. This is definitely, and I know like some of my patrons agree with me, this is a no thoughts head empty kind of read, and I love it for that. It's not often that I enjoy that kind of thing, but there's something about this series that really keeps me hooked. One of the things that I definitely want resolving in the next one is a definitive answer about what's going on with Brexley and the fact that she's linked to Warwick and she's also linked to Scorpion, but she's almost like time traveling back in the past to save these people from the present day. But if the present day hasn't happened, then how can she go back to the past? And I feel like Stacey Marie Brown, like I time travel's a lot, okay, and time travel, you really have to nail down the finer details to pull off time travel well. Is it going to be able to adequately explain all of the wibbly wobbly timey-wimey stuff? I have to say I have a little faith in that regard, but I am interested to see how that resolves and what the deal is. My theory at the minute, or my theory with Warwick at least, is that because he died at the exact time that she was born, I thought it was something to do with the energy transference and the veil falling, but that doesn't explain Scorpion unless that also happened at the exact same time, which it could have done. But then how is she traveling from the present day to be able to do that? That's the bit that confuses me. Regardless, I am excited about Deadlands. I'm hoping that we do get some of these answers and that it doesn't continue to kind of string these questions along while everybody's pondering it, as it introduces a ton of new stuff into the plot. So I did give this one 3 stars as well, pretty much exactly the same as what I said about Savage Lands. I did really enjoy this one. My rating system has changed, so it was a 4 originally, it is a 3 now, but I'm very excited to get into Deadlands. So I have already gotten a little carried away with this book. I started it yesterday and I'm already 124 pages into it, and I can tell the difference between rereading and reading a book for the first time in this series, because I feel like they truly just hit the first time that you read them, because obviously, like I've said, the main draw with this series is that it's so addictive and you just don't have that kind of driving force, or as much of a driving force, when you're rereading. So I definitely feel like I'm gonna have a great time with this. I just feel different reading book 3 as I did books 1 and 2, and I do think it's because 1 and 2 were rereads for me, and I think that you can pick up on the flaws in the series a lot easier when you've already read them before. So the sexual tension between Warwick and Brexley is already ramping up and I'm already here for it. The atmosphere of this one, the setting, is giving me Hunger Games, you know, like later Hunger Games, where I can't spoil the Hunger Games for you. I mean, can you be spoiled for the Hunger Games at this point? But the place that they're in like Mockingjay, it's giving that kind of vibe, and we have already had an explosion. I think Stacey Marie Brown only waited like 50, maybe 60, 70 pages before we had our first explosion of this book. And honestly, at this point, I wish I'd started an explosion count for this series, because there are so many. I feel like the romance is like ramping up as well, like the way that Warwick kind of pursued Brexley until he found her in this location, even though he's saying like, I don't want anything to do with you, you disgust me, leave me alone. I feel like we're getting to a point where they're going to have to admit that like they are into each other, because they're doing whatever they can to resist and just like not admit that there's something going on there. I'm not sure how I feel about this new political faction, because I've said before that this series is repetitive, and it is, but just the fact that like we found her, was it her Uncle Andre, and Lynx, who was in the prison, is affiliated with Uncle Andre, and now we found Uncle Michael, who is the leader of another rebellion group, and this one is affiliated with Keck from the prison. So like we have a long lost family member who is the leader of some sort of like rebellion group, who has a female associate that was in the prison and was trying to help Brexley out. Like, it's a little bit too convenient, you know, like we could have had a little bit of variation in these things instead of like copy and pasting over again. That being said, like I'm definitely having a good time. I know now not to think too much about this series, and I'm not. I'm just along for the ride and it's pretty good. Like like it's a quick read as the others have been, and I'm now just breaking off. Like, I've just done my final sprints before Christmas, so I have a good week now with nothing on, and I'm excited to, I'm excited to blast through this book. At this rate, it's probably gonna be done in the next couple of days. Hello, I'm a little bit further into this now. I'm 250 pages of the way through. The first thing I have to say is I hate the sex scenes. Hate them. You still love the sexual tension in general between Brexley and Warwick, but these sex scenes to me in this read like bad porn. Like, you know how everything in porn is like super exaggerated and unrealistic? That is what these sex scenes read to me, and I was like, I cannot take any of this seriously. So not having a great time with that, although I am enjoying the monogamy-ishness of it. I'm glad that we don't have a bunch of random people just groping people randomly, but we still have everyone making sexual comments, which just really just gives me the ick. Like, Keck needs to rein it in a little bit. Ash, I know you're a tree fairy and most of the time you're okay, but everyone kind of thriving on this sexual tension or sexual energy that Warwick and Brexley are putting out. I don't like it. I don't like it. The only other real thing of note that I have to say at this point is about the nectar that we're looking for. I have a feeling that Brexley is either the nectar in the same, I was going to say in the same way that somebody is something else in a different series, but that would be a spoiler. In either like a way that she is the nectar, or she has ingested the nectar, or her mother ingested the nectar and it was like born into her, because everyone's saying like they've never seen anything like her, and she seems to have like this raw magical ability, which the nectar of the Fae, as far as I can tell, is like raw magic. So that's my leading theory at this point. I know a lot of people were talking spoilers in the Discord, so I haven't actually gone in yet and had a look to see what other people's theories are, because I don't want to spoil myself, but based on the way that like everything that she's doing has never been seen before and is so unexplainable, and the fact that they're looking for this mythical substance that has mysteriously disappeared at around the same time that she was born, and that all of this other weird stuff was happening, I feel like that is potentially the grand reveal that we're going to get at some point. I don't even know if we're going to get it in this book, and I do feel like reveals are being really drawn out in this at times, which can be a little bit frustrating, because I'm like, some of it just needs to happen, like we just need to know and move on to other things at this point. So I just checked in the Discord briefly because I have now finished Deadlands, and some of the comments in there had me rolling, especially related to the sex scenes in this book. Some people really like them, some people really don't. It's very much a mixed bag, but the majority of people, like me, seem to be enjoying the series, even though like we all know it ain't the best. With this one, it was interesting. I thought that the pacing was completely different to the other two books in the series. I feel like books 1 and 2 start really slowly, and then the further in the book you get, the like more the book becomes addictive and like the pace picks up. In this one, I was actually really enjoying the beginning, and the closer we got to the end, the kind of less invested I was in the story. Something that especially frustrated me about this one is that we have just like new creatures popping up left, right and center that haven't been mentioned anywhere else. Like, we started this series just with humans and fae, and then we get to the prison in book 1 and demons and druids are introduced, and then now at this point, like right at the end of this book, I'm pretty sure we've never spoken about necromancers before in this series. I'm pretty sure they rocked up like in that last scene, and now we also have the witches as well, which have also I feel like never been mentioned. I am really glad that we now know what Brexley is. I don't understand the logistics though, because the magic soaked into her placenta, so her placenta slash her is the nectar, which is what I said. Like, I said that I thought that she was the nectar. I just don't understand how it works. Is it because is it her? Like, is it something to do with her? Or is it because the magic, like I thought, I don't know which book I thought this in, but one of my leading theories with Brexley was that the magic from the veil falling was kind of like absorbed into her. Is that what happened with her birth? Like, because she was born at that moment, did like her placenta just suck it all up? And made her the nectar? Or is it something that was gonna happen anyway? Like, I feel like I need a reason for why she's special. I don't understand how people don't know what kind of creature she is, because it seems that her mother and her aunt are fae if they were fighting for the Seelie Queen. That makes sense, right? But surely by looking at her, they would know that she's fae. Like, everyone's telling her she's not fae because her mother isn't and her father obviously isn't, but nobody is like looking at her and saying, well, you're obviously not fae, you're clearly a human. And I feel like being a fae must be kind of obvious in this world, because we haven't heard of any like fae hiding out amongst humans, which would definitely happen if you could pass as human. If you are fae, like you definitely would pass as a human, or the other way around, like if you were human pass as fae if you could. So I'm confused about all of that, and I also don't understand how her being the nectar links to her being life and death, because life and death existed before she did, so how can she be it? So those are the main questions that I have going into Badlands, which I am going to be starting very, very soon. So I'm just rolling right through this series, which is great because this is what I wanted to do in 2021 when I started it and I couldn't. So I'm thankful for you guys that like I get to do this right now. So those are my questions. I don't have necessarily any theories right now, and it's very clear that like things are coming out of left field. So like I don't know what's actually going to happen, but those are the directions that I kind of want the explanations to be going in, although I'm not really sure what the answers are necessarily going to be, you know. So I'm a whole 118 pages into Badlands, and it has been a wild ride so far. I'm actually really glad that I've picked this up only, I think, about a week and a half, maybe even less. Oh no, it's definitely less. It's less than a week, I'm pretty sure, since I finished Deadlands, right? And I'm actually really glad about that, because this starts exactly where the last book ended, which is a little bit jarring because it was just so much. Like in the first 80 pages of this, it was literally non-stop action. I did get an answer to my main question for this book, which was to do with the nectar and how it works. Like, is the placenta magic? Is she magic? Did the veil make it magic? Like, what's going on there? And I was right. It is like the magic of the veil dropping was like sucked up by the placenta, which made Brexley the nectar. But I still don't understand how that ties to her being life and death and like the in-between. Like I don't understand how that whole thing works, like logically. And I'm also both interested but also kind of confused about what's happened with her magic, like why she doesn't have a bond with Warwick anymore. I do feel like Stacey Marie Brown has done this to, I guess, at some point in this book, prove that the bond between her and Warwick is real. It isn't just magic related and they do actually care about each other. But it just seems so weird that it's just like vanished. Like I understand the concept. She resurrected all of these people, which, oh my god, we have necromancers and witches in here now. And Brexley's a witch but also a necromancer, but not really either of them because she is human but magically gifted. But she's alive so she can't be a necromancer. What is going on? I am intrigued because I don't think this is it. Like I think she's going to get her powers back, because it is actually kind of frustrating reading about her being human and how weak she feels, and I don't feel like she's going to find strength within this. I do feel like she is going to get her magic back and like her faster healing abilities and her like better stamina and stuff. I do feel like all of that is coming back, but it is, I guess, kind of refreshing because one of the things that she's lost along with all of these magical abilities is also like this raw sexual chemistry she has that makes everybody obsessed with her, and I'm really, really glad that that isn't super present right now. Also glad that her and Warwick aren't really speaking at the minute, although I am kind of sick of this whole like I don't care about you, I don't like you, I don't want anything to do with you attitude that they both have. Like I want to see a softer side to Warwick now, and Ash keeps saying over and over again like, oh, like he's different with you, like I've never seen him like this before. And I'm like, well, he needs to be even more different. Like I like love interests where the female main character is their weakness. Like I like the asshole that has a soft spot for the main character. I don't like a love interest that's an asshole, like a legitimate asshole to the main character, which is what Warwick is being pretty consistently. Also sexy, but like not great as well. You know, Brexley's mother, once again, I realised this, it took me a while to like latch onto this, but we also now have another political faction or a magical group, which is the Clan of Necromancers, that are once again being led by somebody who's related to Brexley. And then we had an explosion on the island after we found that out. So same old. But I'm glad that we do have a little bit of a shift in tone with Brexley losing the magic. How long that's going to last, I'm not too sure. So don't get me wrong, I am as happy as the next person that Killian is alive. I don't understand why Brexley's so obsessed with him. Like, she spent 50 pages with him, maybe. Like, that might even be a stretch. And like, yeah, he's hot. Yeah, he has this potentially softer side that nobody sees apart from you, from the very small amount of time you spent with him. But like, I would say he's done her dirty more often than not. So for her to just like fling herself into his arms because he's alive, I'm feeling that's traitorous, because he took Warwick's sister and child, like Warwick's sister's child, his nephew, and held them hostage. And they're potentially dead. I don't think they're actually dead, just like I knew that Killian and Xander weren't dead. But like, that for me outweighs the good that he did, or the kindness that he showed her earlier on in the series. I'm happy he's alive though, because I do like Killian. Who I don't like though is Xander. Like, there's just something about shifters that really give me the ick. Wolves especially, because wolves are very touchy-feely, and I just feel like I need a little bit of space. Like, please stop petting me. Don't do it. Which is wild, because like I'm real clingy with my dog, you know. Even horse shifters, like, why are you neighing, sir? Why? Is this supposed to be cute? Because I feel it feels weird. It feels weird to me. So Badlands is now a book that I read and I felt like I enjoyed it a little bit more in some ways, because it did break the equilibrium of the rest of the series. We had slightly fewer explosions. We had the loss of Brexley's abilities, which meant that not everybody that she encountered was obsessed with her. Everything was a little bit more difficult for her, which I appreciated. Warwick wasn't around quite as much, and we felt, I guess, a strengthening of their relationship in a more organic way, arguably. But I just feel, especially the more I go into this series, the less thought out it seems. Like, there are a lot of conveniences, there are a lot of, like, we know, repetitive incidences and the same things happening over and over again with the same results. Nothing ever feels truly consequential. Like, I don't think that any of the main characters are gonna die. I think if they did die, it would be a fake death for them to be either resurrected or for it to turn out that they never died at all. And because of that, I go through this series even more no thoughts, head empty than I had been previously, because I know that nothing like truly matters. Now, at the end of this one, we did see our characters get into a little bit of a dire situation where they are trapped in the new prison, and the way that this is laid out, it seems like it's going to be like a really big deal. Like, there's no way that they can get out of this, and I did appreciate it ending on a little bit of a more hopeless note. But at the same time, I don't doubt that we are going to be getting out of this pretty sharpish in the next book. I think that at this point, if I wasn't reading this series for a book club, it would be one of the series that I said that I continued with, or that I would continue with, and then eventually kind of just forgot to do that until I just couldn't be bothered anymore. Obviously, because it is our book club book, I am going to be carrying on, and we do only have 2 books to go now. So at this point, I don't really feel like my opinions on this series are going to change as a whole. I am intrigued as to why book 6 is so long though, but I guess we'll find out, I guess, what kind of situation we're dealing with after the next book, which is it Bloodlands? Is Bloodlands book 5? Is that what I'm reading next? But yeah, I did give this one 3 stars. I appreciated that it was a little bit different from the installments that came before, but I still don't feel like anything is so different that it's going to have like a massive impact on my enjoyment of this series, or actually on the narrative as a whole, really. And with that, book 4 is complete, and we will be moving on swiftly to book 5 in this series. So I am about to start Shadowland, which is the final book in this series, and before I get into that, I feel like I do need to address the elephant in the room, which is that I absolutely did not film anything regarding Bloodlands, which was book 5 in this series. So let me explain myself. Okay, I read that for a 24-hour Patreon readathon where I was sick the entire time, so I didn't want to film anything because I felt terrible, and also I was only operating on like half a brain cell. So now that I'm on the other side of that, I actually don't really remember much of what I read. And you know what? It isn't even an issue. Like, I'm not even worried about following book 6 based on the fact that I barely remember anything from book 5, because I truly just think with this series, it doesn't matter. And what I do remember about Bloodlands actually is that it felt kind of redundant, because we started in the prison, we ended in the prison, and there wasn't very much, like, we had a brief respite from the prison in the middle, and we found out that Ivan is truly the worst, which I feel like we already knew, and then Brexley killed a bunch of people at the end, and I feel like that is all I need to know from book 5. And I gotta say, like, it was my lowest rated book in the series. I gave it 2 stars. And at this point, the novelty is kind of wearing off with this series. And by kind of, I mean it absolutely has. And I don't really want to read this book, but it's the last book in the series and it's for a book club. So we're gonna smash through it. I know that this is dual perspective. I have started it. I'm 16 pages. Oh my God, it's more than dual perspective. I did not know that. So the prologue was Brexley. Chapter 1 was Warwick. Chapter 2 is Killian. And then we also have Scorpion, Caden. What is this madness? I am shocked. Okay, so I'm a little bit more interested in it now that I know that we have so many perspectives. But why do we need so many perspectives in the final book in a series? I do not know. I'm hoping for a satisfying conclusion to this, but I do know that when I was checking the, like, how many pages are in this, there's always like a bold bit at the end which normally says like continue the story in book 4 or something similar, and in this one it says the end of one story is merely the beginning of another, which leads me to believe that there are going to be some sort of continuations to this series, whether that is a direct continuation of this story, which I think is less likely, or like a spin-off or something, which is possible. But I definitely want a conclusive end to this one, because I can tell you now, like, I'm probably not going to be continuing on with whatever else Stacey Marie Brown releases in this world. So I am hoping that I can get through this quite quickly. It is long, which is also putting me off, because one of the benefits of the others is that even though they're not the best written, they're kind of repetitive, they're short, and also the compelling writing style means that they don't last very long. But this one is 577 pages, so it's gonna take me a little while to get through. So I am 300 pages into this book now. I'm over halfway through and I am so ready for it to be over. I'm so ready, guys. I'm tired and uninterested. It's better than the last one, 100%. There's definitely more going on. It seems a little bit more cohesive, a little bit less redundant, but it's multi-perspective and I just don't feel like it needs to be. We're following Warwick, Killian, Caden, Scorpion, and Brexley, of course. And first off, do we need to follow every single male main character here? Couldn't we have followed maybe Birdie or Hannah instead of Scorpion or Caden? They're all pairing off as well, which I find super unnecessary, but it's like, it happens in every fantasy romance series that's like this with a large cast. It happens in like Throne of Glass, in Agatha. Everyone ends up with somebody by the end. It's not unusual, and I wouldn't mind as much if we weren't then in these characters' perspectives, because now we have like 95 romances going on that have like multiple sex scenes each, which I'm now skipping. Like, I am truly skipping the smut at this point. I'm not even reading a little bit of it. I'm like, cool, smut, let's move on. I just don't feel like the multi-perspective is necessary, because at this point where I'm at now, everyone's kind of together again. Like, at the beginning they were separated, so fair enough, like maybe we wanted to see what everyone else was doing, but I don't feel like they were separate enough to need as many perspectives as we have. And we could have just maybe followed Brexley until we caught up with the boys, because I don't think they were actually really doing anything all that interesting, aside from finding out that, is it Sonia, was building an army, and that could have been told to us in a different way. I do think that the main problem with this series is that it's 6 books when it could have been 3. I don't feel like, because like book 5, kind of redundant, kind of pointless. It was a book for the sake of being a book. It didn't really advance the plot very much. So then I feel like one of the main reasons why I'm dragging so much on this series is because it just doesn't need to be as long as it is, especially with how repetitive it is within the narrative and also the writing. So yeah, I feel like if this series was 3 or 4 books long, it would have ended on a high note for me, whereas now I'm feeling kind of bitter that I have to read it because I'm not enjoying it anymore because it's gone on for so long. I also think that at the point where we started feeding people placenta, I mentally checked out and I don't think I'm going to be mentally checking back in. That was a hard line for me that was crossed. So hopefully the second half will pass quickly. I have to say, like, I read the first half within a couple of days, and then I've actually put this down for a few days and not really wanted to pick it up, but I do want to get it done. It's like Saturday afternoon now. I want to have it done by the end of this week, so by tomorrow. And I actually have nothing on tonight. Curtis is busy. He's playing cards with one of his friends, so I'm gonna try and see how far into this I can get. So if you see a lot of me today, that's why I'm trying to push through. So I am so very nearly done with this book. I have exactly 60 pages left, and we're kind of, I guess, in the thick of the final battle now. I am hoping that not all 60 pages are final battle and that we do have some resolution at the end. I'm getting really tired of all of the romance going on, I gotta say. The only romance that I actually care about remotely in this series at this point is Killian and Rosie, even though that kind of came out of nowhere in, I guess, the last 2 books and maybe the very end of book 4. And I feel like book 5, especially after reading this, was so unnecessary. This book could have been spread across book 5 and 6, and book 5 like really truly did not need to happen. Nothing really of note happened in it. This is actually kind of plotty, but then it's also like tedious because it's 600 pages and it's almost twice as long as any other book in this series. So I'm so ready for it to be done, and wish me luck. I don't really have any thoughts. I gave up on thoughts a long time ago with this series, as a lot of you guys probably noticed, and I know a lot of you feel the same, but we're nearly there, guys. I'm sorry, but I've just hit the epilogue, which is 40 pages. Who needs a 40-page epilogue? Who do you think you are, Stacey? Robert Jordan? Like, what? I am so happy to be here right now, guys, to not only be wrapping up Shadowlands for you, but also this whole damn series. I was annoyed by the end of this book because, like I said, I don't feel like it needs to be multi-perspective. Like 100% that was unnecessary. But then you get to the end and you realize that the reason why it's multi-perspective is because Stacey Marie Brown wants to launch, I don't even think it's one spin-off, like 9 different spin-offs off the back of this mediocre ass series. And I'm like, do we need to be doing this? Is this really necessary? I think the most annoying thing about it being multi-perspective and the fact that it is like continuing is, like I said, some of the like installments in this series are not the most relevant. Like book 5 definitely did not need to exist, and you could say the same about multiple like elements of these books. Like they could have been better edited, they could have been shorter, the whole series could have been 3 or 4 books instead of 6. So then to introduce these multi-perspectives, these different perspectives, and leave a lot of their plot lines, like the side characters storylines, unresolved when they could have come into fruition in book 3, in book 4, in book 5, in book 6, instead of all of the dead space we have, and then be like, yeah, there's gonna be more in this world. I will not be reading it. I absolutely 100% will not be reading it. I no longer would recommend this series, which sounds like tea. It's not tea, it's just the first 2 books I liked. I thought they were addictive, I thought they were compelling, I really enjoyed the fast pacing and the way that you could get swept away with the story. Now that we're at the end of this series, I'm like, it was too long-winded, it went on for too long. The only redeeming quality of it really is that element of compulsion within the writing. But by book 6 that gets a little bit old, where it's fine, kind of like things happening just for the sake of them happening. And you all know I like things to have a purpose, like a concise beginning, middle and end, where we can see like where we're going with this story. And this is a series that felt very much like it was pantsed instead of plotted. I skipped all of the smut in Shadowlands as well, which I haven't been loving smut in general as much, but especially in this book with the amount that we had with all of the new couples pairing off, it got even to be like a little bit more much than it already was, if that made any kind of sense. I just strung a lot of words together and I'm not sure if they came together in a cohesive sentence at all, but hopefully you catch my drift. Thank you to all of you who stuck with me through this till the end. I know a lot of you guys have very similar feelings to me. I know that 99% of us are relieved that this series is over, and a lot of us as well are super eager to get into our next series for the Alphaho book club, which has been revealed to be the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent, the first book being Daughter of No Worlds, which we will be kicking off with in May. So thank you for coming along with me on this journey, and fingers crossed we enjoy our next series a little bit more. So that is about it for this spoilery vlog on the Savage Land series by Stacey Marie Brown. I do hope you've enjoyed this vlog as mediocre. This vlog was about as mediocre as this series of books, I cannot lie, but I do hope you have enjoyed it somewhat if you've made it this far. If you have, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.